Kara Langley didn't even think, she just ran. 1 second, she was crossing Fifth Avenue with a coffee in one hand and her sketchpad tucked under her arm. And the next, a little boy darted away from his nanny and straight toward the oncoming traffic. Horns blared. Tires screeched. Kara dropped her coffee, lunged forward, and wrapped her arms around the child, yanking him back onto the sidewalk just before a black SUV barreled past. The boy clung to her leg, shaking. He couldn't have been more than 4. Hey, you're okay," Kara breathed, crouching down and brushing his brown curls out of his eyes. "Are you hurt?" The nanny, flustered and red-faced, finally caught up. "Walter, oh my God. Thank you. He just slipped away for a second." "It happens," Kara said, though her heart was still pounding like a war drum. "He's okay. That's what matters." Walter looked up at her with big, tear-filled eyes and whispered, "You saved me." Kara's chest squeezed. "You scared the life out of me, little man." The nanny was still apologizing, frantically checking Walter's arms and legs, when a sleek black town car pulled up to the curb and a man stepped out. His presence hit like a brick wall. Tall, broad shoulders under a tailored charcoal coat, dark hair swept back, sharp jawline. He moved with purpose, like the sidewalk belonged to him. The moment his eyes landed on Walter, everything about him changed. "Walter." His voice was deep and commanding, but laced with panic. The boy turned. "Daddy." Kara stepped aside as Walter ran straight into his father's arms. The man dropped to one knee and held him tightly. "I told you to stay close," he said, voice tight. "You could have been hurt." "I'm sorry," Walter mumbled. "That lady saved me." The man looked up and saw Kara for the first time. His eyes locked on hers. And for a long second, everything stopped. "Kara," the nanny said quickly, "this is Mr. Brandon O'Connor." Walter's father. Of course he was. He had the look of a man who didn't wait in lines or ask for permission. Brandon stood, keeping a protective hand on Walter's shoulder. "You pulled him back from traffic?" Kara nodded, brushing hair from her face. "Yeah. He just ran. I couldn't let him." "You didn't hesitate?" "No. I didn't think, I just reacted." He looked at her like he was trying to figure something out about her. Then, without warning, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a card. "I'd like to thank you properly," he said, handing it to her. "Dinner. Or lunch. Anything. Just name it." She looked down at the card. Black. No company name. Just his full name, phone number, and a private address. Kara blinked. "That's not necessary, I insist." "I'm not really," she hesitated. "I didn't do it for a reward." "Neither would I," he said. "But I still say thank you. Call me." And with that, he turned, lifted Walter into his arms, and disappeared into the town car. The entire thing lasted 5 minutes. Kara stared down at the card, heart still racing. Brandon O'Connor. The name sounded familiar. She turned it over in her hand and felt something strange settle in her chest. She hadn't expected her morning to take this turn. By the time Kara made it back to her apartment in Queens, she'd Googled him. Brandon O'Connor, CEO of O'Connor Holdings, real estate mogul, tech investor, worth over $60 million. She dropped the card on her kitchen counter like it was on fire. "Yeah, right?" she muttered to herself. "Like he actually expects me to call." She didn't. Not for 2 weeks. But the thought of him, his eyes, his voice, the way he'd held his son like the world would collapse without him stayed in her head. And when she finally found herself sketching his face in her notebook without even realizing it, she gave up. She called. The restaurant was like something out of a movie. All glass and gold, tucked onto the top floor of a hotel she couldn't even afford to enter. The hostess greeted her by name and led her through the glowing candlelit space to a private table with a view of the skyline. Brandon stood as she approached. He was wearing another custom suit. His tie was undone and his eyes lit up when he saw her. "You came." Kara sat slowly. Still not sure why. "Because you saved my son," he said simply. "And I haven't stopped thinking about you since." She blinked. "That's direct." I don't like wasting time. The waiter appeared with champagne Kara didn't order. Brandon waved him off and turned back to her. I know this is strange, he said. But I meant it. I'm not the guy who lets someone like this pass by. I'm not really. She exhaled. I'm just a freelance illustrator trying to pay rent on time. I'm not used to this. She glanced around the glittering restaurant. Any of this. Brandon's voice softened. I'm not looking for someone to impress. I'm looking for something real. Kara stared at him, and for the first time she realized he meant it. Not just the dinner. Not just the thank you. He was interested in her, and for reasons she couldn't explain, her chest fluttered. Dinner stretched into coffee, then dessert, then laughter. He asked about her art. She asked about his work. He talked about Walter, and when he did, he looked down like he was afraid of saying too much. I've had sole custody since he was 1, he said quietly. His mom left. Didn't want the life. Kara was quiet a moment. You're doing great with him. Some days I feel like I'm winging it. That's what parenting is. Brandon looked at her like he hadn't expected her to understand. When they finally stepped outside, the city wind was sharp. Kara hugged her coat tighter. Brandon shrugged off his jacket and draped it around her shoulders without asking. Thank you, she said softly. He looked down at her, eyes searching. Can I see you again? She hesitated, but deep down she already knew the answer. Yeah, she whispered. Okay. He smiled. And just like that, something shifted between them. Something real. The first time Brandon showed up at Kara's apartment building, he stood out like a grand piano in a pawn shop. She spotted him through the window from her second-floor unit, standing beside a sleek silver Aston Martin parked in front of the cracked stoop. He wore dark jeans and a navy button-down, sleeves rolled up, hands tucked in his pockets as he glanced up toward the building with a look of quiet resolve. Kara buzzed him in before she had time to second-guess it. Sorry, she said, opening the door to her apartment and stepping aside. It's a bit of a mess. I wasn't expecting. Whatever this is. He stepped inside, eyes scanning the space. The walls were covered in pinned sketches, half-finished canvases, and shelves stacked with brushes and paint tubes. A worn couch sat beneath the window, and her drafting table stood in the corner, bathed in sunlight. I like it, he said, his tone free of judgment. It feels like someone actually lives here. She raised an eyebrow. That's a low bar. He reached out, picking up a small framed drawing from her desk. You did this. Yeah. It was a commission for an indie children's book. Didn't go anywhere, but I liked the character. Brandon studied the drawing a moment longer, then carefully set it back. You have real talent. Kara crossed her arms. Do you always walk into women's apartments and compliment their hustle? He met her eyes. Only when it's deserved. She didn't respond right away. His presence was unnerving in a way that had nothing to do with intimidation. He wasn't pretending to be impressed. He wasn't placating. He was seeing her, and that made her feel bare. Why are you really here? She asked. He looked around, then walked to the window and leaned against the sill, his expression unreadable. I was supposed to fly to Houston this morning. Meeting with a developer. I canceled it. That sounds like a terrible business decision, she said. Maybe. But I couldn't shake the thought that if I left without seeing you again, I'd regret it. Kara exhaled slowly. You barely know me. I know enough to want to. He paused, then added, I don't do this. Show up at women's apartments? Chase something I can't control. That surprised her. You control everything? In my world? I have to. She leaned against the counter, arms still crossed. And what happens when you can't? His jaw tightened. Then I figure out how to change the rules. The silence between them stretched. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance and a dog barked on the street below. Inside, Kara's pulse thudded in her ears. She wasn't used to men like Brandon. Men who didn't hesitate, who didn't hide what they wanted. Can I take you somewhere? He asked. Tonight. I don't own anything that fits into your world. I'll handle it. Kara narrowed her eyes. I'm not joking. Neither am I. She stared at him. This wasn't a man who made empty promises. There was weight behind his words, like every decision he made had consequence. And despite the red flags waving in her mind, her gut told her one thing: trust him. I have to be back by midnight, she said. Brandon pulled out his phone and made a single call. Yes. She's 5'7", slim build. Something elegant but simple. Deliver it to the address I gave you earlier. 2 hours. He hung up and turned to her. You just ordered a dress like it's takeout. I like to be efficient. Kara blinked. What if I hated the style? Then I'd send 5 more until you didn't. She shook her head, half laughing. You're insane. Possibly. But you're still coming with me. 2 hours later, a black garment bag arrived at her door with a handwritten note. Wear this. Trust me. The dress inside was midnight blue, floor-length silk with a daring neckline and delicate straps that crossed at the back. It fit like it had been made for her. The matching heels were tucked in the bottom of the bag, along with a velvet box containing a single sapphire pendant on a silver chain. When Brandon returned to pick her up, he looked at her like she'd stopped time. You're breathtaking, he said simply. She flushed. You had that dress delivered to a walk-up, and I'd carry you down every floor if I had to. The car ride was quiet except for the soft hum of music from the speakers. She kept glancing at him, trying to understand the man who could command boardrooms by day and quote poetry over dinner without sounding rehearsed. They arrived at a private rooftop overlooking the river. A long glass table was set under hanging lights with a spread of food that looked like it had been curated by a Michelin-starred chef. The entire rooftop was empty except for them. Kara stared. You rented out an entire building for dinner? No, Brandon said casually. I own it. They ate slowly, the city glittering around them. He asked about her favorite childhood memory. She asked why he never remarried. He hesitated, then gave a small smile. I stopped believing people wanted me. They wanted the money, the name, the safety net. That's not the same as not being wanted. It feels the same. Kara looked at him. You're not easy to read. Neither are you. She laughed quietly. I'm all over the place. You're composed. Controlled. I'm only composed until something matters. He reached across the table and took her hand. His touch was warm, grounding. She felt the rush of something unfamiliar, like the moment before a wave hits when your chest lifts and the world goes silent. This isn't a game for me, Kara, he said. I don't do casual. And I don't walk away when something scares me. Are you scared now? Terrified. He stood then, walked around the table, and helped her up. He didn't ask, he just pulled her close, one hand resting against the small of her back. They danced slowly beneath the lights without music, the city their only soundtrack. Kara felt every heartbeat, every breath, every inch of space that no longer existed between them. She didn't ask where this was going. She didn't want to know. Because for the first time in a long time, she wasn't looking for an ending. She was ready for a beginning. Kara didn't expect to see Brandon again for at least a few days. Their rooftop evening had been too surreal, too perfect, like something out of someone else's life. But 3 mornings later, she walked into her favorite local coffee shop and nearly dropped her keys when she saw him sitting at a corner table reading a stack of papers with a cappuccino beside him. He looked up like he'd been waiting for her. You don't drink coffee here, she said, approaching cautiously. I do now, Brandon replied, folding the papers and setting them aside. Sit with me. She hesitated, then slid into the seat across from him. How did you even know I come here? I asked the guy at the counter. You left your loyalty card behind last time. You stalked my coffee habits? I was curious, he said simply. And I wanted to see you without a rooftop or a dress between us. Kara narrowed her eyes. You're persistent. Brandon leaned forward. You haven't asked why I'm really here. I figured you'd tell me when you were ready. His gaze didn't waver. I have a proposal. Is this where you tell me I'm the long-lost heiress to a shipping empire? No, he said, lips twitching faintly. This is where I tell you I want to hire you. Kara blinked. You want to hire me? For a project I'm launching. A foundation I fund is opening a children's center in Brooklyn. We need original artwork for the wall, something bright, hopeful. You'd be paid, of course. Generously. She studied him. Why me? Because I've seen what you draw when you think no one's watching. Kara exhaled slowly. This isn't a favor, right? You're not trying to make me feel obligated. No. I'm offering you work because you're the best person for it. And if I say no, I'll still ask you to dinner tonight." Her lips curled despite herself. "You're impossible. I'm just sure." She looked down at the table, heart thudding. "I'll think about it." He nodded. "That's all I ask." They both stood. Kara grabbed her coffee and Brandon stepped aside so she could pass. But just before she reached the door, he called her name. When she turned, he said, "I meant what I said on the rooftop." She didn't answer. She just nodded and walked out, pulse thrumming. Later that night, she sat in her living room surrounded by old sketchbooks, flipping through years of work. She stopped on a page she'd drawn 2 winters ago. A little girl in a yellow coat, standing in front of a mural filled with stars and animals. She remembered the feeling she'd had when she'd sketched it, hopeful, even when everything in her life had felt uncertain. She called the number on Brandon's card. "You really don't give up," she said when he picked up. "I'm glad you noticed," he answered. "I'll do the children's center. I'll have the contract sent over tomorrow. But I have a condition," Kara added. "You don't get to hover." "Let me do it my way. I'd expect nothing less." The next few weeks blurred into a rhythm Kara hadn't anticipated. The center was still under construction, a bright, airy building with high ceilings and huge windows. She was given a dedicated studio space on the top floor, overlooking the playground being installed below. She arrived early, stayed late, and poured herself into the project like it was the only thing that mattered. Brandon showed up twice. The first time, he brought Walter. The boy ran straight to Kara, gripping her hand like they were old friends. "Daddy says you're making magic on the walls. Only if you help," she told him, handing him a brush and a blank canvas. Brandon leaned against the doorframe, watching her interact with his son like it was the most natural thing in the world. He didn't interrupt. He didn't direct. He just watched. The second time, he came alone after hours. She was still painting a scene of children flying paper airplanes across a field and didn't hear him enter. "You lose track of time when you're doing something you love," he said from behind her. She turned, startled. "How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough to know this place will change lives." Kara set down her brush and wiped her hands on a cloth. "You really believe that?" "I wouldn't have built it if I didn't." She studied him. There was something quieter about him tonight. Less polished. "You seem different." He walked toward the window, hands in his pockets. "I used to think success was about permanence. Buildings. Assets. Things that couldn't be taken. And now I think the things that matter most are the ones you can't hold at all." Kara stepped beside him. "What changed?" "You," he said without hesitation. The air thickened between them. "I've spent years building walls," he continued. "Not just around me, around Walter. Around everything. But you," he turned to her. "You slipped right through. I wasn't trying to." "I know. That's what scares me." Kara shook her head. "You don't get to say things like that unless you mean them." "I do." She held his gaze. "Then prove it." He stepped forward, slow and deliberate, until there was barely an inch between them. He didn't reach for her. He didn't rush it. "You're asking me to let go of the one thing I've always held onto control. Then maybe it's time you learned how to fall." His breath hitched just slightly. When he kissed her, it wasn't tentative. It was sure. Grounded. Like he'd already made the decision and was only now catching up to it. His hand slid to the small of her back, the other cupping her face, and Kara felt herself melt into him like she belonged nowhere else. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I don't want this to be temporary," he said quietly. "Then don't let it be." Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the room in golden light. Kara turned back to her mural, heart pounding in her chest. "I still have a lot of work to do," she said. Brandon didn't argue. He just pulled over a chair and sat beside her. "Then I'll wait." And he did. Kara stood frozen in the middle of the gallery's main floor, her fingers clutched tightly around her portfolio. The grand opening of the O'Connor Children's Center was only hours away, and the final walkthrough was underway. Workers bustled around her, adjusting lighting panels, carrying in floral arrangements, and polishing every surface until it gleamed. Children's laughter echoed faintly from the lower level, where volunteers helped usher in the first wave of families for the evening's celebration. But the only thing Kara could focus on was the mural. Her mural. It stretched across the tallest wall of the main staircase, a sweeping blend of color and imagination that told a story of resilience, wonder, and growth. Paper birds soared over open fields, children of different backgrounds reached toward the stars, and soft clouds gave way to bursts of golden light. It was the most personal thing she'd ever created, and now the world was about to see it. Brandon stepped in beside her, his expression unreadable. "I didn't interfere," he said. "Not once." Kara turned toward him. "No, you didn't, and that's exactly why it turned out like this." He nodded slowly, then looked up at the mural. "I never imagined it like this. I thought we'd end up with something corporate, polished, safe." "You were ready to settle for that?" "I was ready to settle for a lot of things," he said. "Before you." She didn't answer immediately. The weight of the moment pressed against her ribs like a held breath. The past few weeks had changed everything. The center, the work, the time she spent with Brandon and Walter. But she hadn't let herself hope for what came next. Not until now. "Walter asked if you were staying over again," Brandon said suddenly. Kara blinked. "I wasn't aware I ever had. You fell asleep on the couch last week." He assumed it meant something. She smiled faintly. "He's observant." "He is," Brandon said. "He also asked if I was going to marry you." Her breath caught. "What did you say?" "I told him I didn't know yet." Kara looked at him quickly, but he wasn't watching her. He was staring at the mural again. "Because I was waiting to ask you the right way." He stepped back slowly, reaching into the inside pocket of his suit. In his hand was a small velvet box, but he didn't open it. Not yet. He held it gently, as if the weight of it could shift everything. "You didn't just save my son that day," he said. "You changed the way I see the world, the way I see myself. I built everything to protect the life I had. But you made me want more. Not because I was missing something, but because I didn't know how much more there could be." Kara's throat tightened. Brandon finally looked at her. "I don't want to control this. I don't want to plan it like one of my deals. I just want you to say yes because you know it's right." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, and unlike anything she'd ever imagined for herself. It gleamed beneath the gallery lights, unobscured by flash or spectacle. "Marry me, Kara." She didn't speak. She stepped forward, slowly, until her hand was in his and her eyes brimmed with tears that didn't fall. "Yes," she said, voice soft but unwavering. "Absolutely yes." The room faded out. The workers, the music, the movement, none of it mattered as Brandon pulled her into his arms and kissed her with the kind of certainty that came from knowing there would be no more running. No more wondering. Just them. Later that evening, the center glowed beneath a canopy of warm lights. Families filled the space, children darting across the new playground, parents marveling at the artwork and the vision behind it. Kara stood by the mural, answering questions, watching strangers connect with the story she'd poured herself into. Walter ran up to her, cheeks flushed and eyes wide. "Did you see the cupcakes? They have stars on them. Just like the wall." "I did," Kara said, crouching to meet his eye. "Are they as good as they look?" He nodded solemnly. "I had too." Brandon appeared behind him, hand resting on his son's shoulder. "He's riding the sugar high of the century." Kara reached out and gently brushed frosting from Walter's cheek. "You okay with me being around all the time?" Walter grinned. "You belong here." Brandon met her eyes, and she felt it again, the quiet promise that had taken root between them. Not just in words or grand gestures, but in the way their lives had begun wrapping around each other like vines drawn to light. The press arrived shortly after, snapping photos of the event, the artwork, the attendees. Brandon gave a brief statement about the purpose of the center, how it was meant to be more than a building, a place where children could feel seen and nurtured no matter where they came from. But when the photographers asked him about the woman behind the mural, he simply said, "She's the heart of it." Kara didn't need the headline to feel the truth of it. Weeks passed. The center opened fully to the public. Kara's work was praised in several art columns. She began receiving commissions from galleries that once ignored her emails. But she never left the center. Not really. She taught a weekly workshop there, guiding children through their own creative journeys. And every afternoon, she walked a few blocks to pick up Walter from school, his backpack bouncing as he ran into her arms with stories of his day. Brandon proposed again, this time with Walter holding the box and grinning like the co-conspirator he was. They married in the garden behind the center, surrounded by the children whose lives they were helping shape. Kara wore a dress she designed herself. Brandon stood in a tailored navy suit with no tie, and his hand never left hers. There were no fireworks, no press, no spectacle, just love. Genuine, earned, enduring. As they danced beneath the string lights, Walter curled up in a chair nearby, fast asleep with a cupcake still in his hand. Brandon leaned close, his voice low against her ear. I used to believe everything had to be built to last, he whispered. But you taught me the best things don't need to be built. They just need to be found. Kara held him tighter. She hadn't gone looking for any of this. But she had stopped a child from running into traffic. And in doing so, she'd run headfirst into the kind of love that wasn't just life-changing, it was forever. Kara adjusted the strap of her bag as she stepped into the newly converted office nestled on the second floor of the Children's Center. The walls were painted a soft cream, dotted with framed drawings from the kids she'd mentored over the past year. In the corner stood an easel with a half-finished piece of a little girl flying a kite made of stars. Her brushes were still wet from this morning's session, and the faint scent of lavender from the diffuser Brandon had insisted on buying her filled the air. Brandon stood by the window, tie loosened, phone pressed to his ear. He glanced up as she entered, his eyes softening immediately. With a quick nod, he ended the call and set the phone on the desk. I thought you had a board meeting, she said, dropping her bag on the couch. I rescheduled it. She raised an eyebrow. You rescheduled a meeting with the mayor's office? I had a better offer, he said. I wanted to go over the plans with you before we finalize anything. He waved her over to the desk where several blueprints were unfurled. She leaned in, scanning the drawings. A new wing, 2 additional classrooms, a rooftop garden. Are you really going through with the expansion? She asked, tracing her fingers over the proposed playground area. I'm not just going through with it, he replied. I want you to design the entire interior. Kara blinked. You already let me paint half the center. This time, I want you to lead the vision. Pick the artists. Shape the space. It should feel like your heart is in every inch of it. She turned to him, her voice quieter. Why are you doing this? Brandon didn't hesitate. Because I've spent my life building things to last. But the things that matter most, they have to live, they have to evolve. And you see the world in a way I never did. I want to build this together. Not just the center. Everything. Kara stepped back, folding her arms. You're not nervous about giving up control? I've never trusted anyone more. She studied him, his face open in a way she'd never seen when they first met. There was nothing guarded anymore, no calculation, no walls. Just him. What if I want to put a giant mural of a talking turtle in the new wing? Then we'll name the classroom after him. She laughed, shaking her head. You're serious? I'm completely serious. I already bought the domain name for shelbytheturtle.org. Her laughter turned to disbelief. You did not. I did, he said. Walter's idea. She covered her mouth, stifling a laugh. You're hopeless. I'm in love. He stepped closer, sliding his arms around her waist. And I'm not afraid of what that means anymore. She tilted her head. Even if I say I want to paint the bathrooms in neon yellow, I'll wear sunglasses. Kara rested her head on his chest, closing her eyes as his heartbeat thudded steadily beneath her ear. There was a peace here that she hadn't known she needed. A steadiness. A home. Brandon, she murmured. Are you happy? He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. More than I ever thought was possible. They stood like that for a while, the hum of life from the center below drifting into the room. Children's footsteps echoed on the stairs, and the distant sound of a piano being played off-key made Kara smile. Kara? Brandon said. I've been thinking. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small envelope. "We never really had a honeymoon." She took the envelope, curious. Inside was a single plane ticket. First class. Destination, Positano. Her eyes widened. "Italy? I rented a villa. Private beach? Comes with its own chef." She looked up at him slowly. "You rented a villa. I was going to buy it but thought that might be too much." She laughed, the sound full and real. "When?" "Next Friday. I already cleared your calendar." "How did you?" "I bribed your assistant with cookies." Kara shook her head, smiling. "You're impossible. You said that once before. And you still married me. Best bad decision I ever made." He kissed her gently, the kind of kiss that asked for nothing and gave everything. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "Come home?" he asked softly. "I already am." That evening they returned to the townhouse, no longer just his, but theirs. Walter was sprawled out on the rug in the living room, building a spaceship out of magnet tiles. He looked up when they entered and immediately held out the structure. "I made this for you," he said to Kara. She crouched beside him. "Is it for me to ride in?" "No," he said seriously. "It's to protect you. In case aliens come." Brandon leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "That's my boy." Kara looked up at them both, her heart full. Later that night, after Walter had fallen asleep beside a stack of picture books, and the city lights flickered softly outside their bedroom windows, Kara curled beneath the covers while Brandon traced lazy circles along her back. "I think our life is going to be messy," she said. "Unquestionably. Chaotic. No doubt. Full of things we can't predict." He kissed her shoulder. "But never without love." She turned to face him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for letting me be exactly who I am." Brandon brushed her hair back from her face. "You didn't let me be anything else. And that's the greatest gift you've ever given me." They fell asleep wrapped in each other, the kind of sleep that only comes when there is nothing left to fear. Summer turned to fall. The expansion broke ground and Kara's designs were featured in a local magazine. Children from all over the borough flooded the center, their artwork filling the hallways. Parents smiled more. Laughter lingered longer. And at the heart of it all, Kara and Brandon built not just a legacy, but a life. On the first anniversary of the center's opening, they hosted a celebration in the garden. Walter stood proudly between them as Kara unveiled a new mural, a depiction of a tree with golden leaves, each one painted by a child who had passed through the doors of the center. As the crowd applauded, Kara leaned into Brandon's side. "Think we did something good?" she asked. He looked at her, his voice low and certain. "We did something unforgettable." And they had. Not just for the city, not just for the children, but for each other. Because love, when it's real, doesn't just change your life. It becomes it.